Time to elevate. You're running on empty with Matt and Tony.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Running on Empty. I am Matt.
And I'm Tony.
And we're running on empty. And this episode, we are going to be continuing our interviews with senatorial candidates from Wisconsin. Tony, why don't you jump in and tell us who we have today?
Yeah, we are joined today by State Senator Chris Larson. He represents the 7th Senatorial District in the state of Wisconsin. Senator Larson, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely thrilled to be with you guys. Thank you for taking the time and paying attention and talking to all the candidates in this race. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Senator Larson is here today because he is running for the United States Senate. He's been in the Wisconsin State Senate since, I believe, 2011.
Correct.
When you actually challenged an incumbent Democrat back in 2011. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah.
I could talk about that if you want to.
Well, that's how I became aware of you, and at the time I found it refreshing. I mean, the senator you challenged was a so-called moderate.
Yep.
And you're part of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and you got in there and challenged, and you won. And Senator Larson became the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, I believe, in 2013 and 14.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And you've run for county executive a few times, right? 2 times, did not win. And so what? You're in the state Senate. Why are you running for the United States Senate?
Yeah, I would say, look, I think that there is a lot of it has to do with the challenge that exists to our democracy and exists to our state, or in the case of running for local office, running to protect my local neighborhoods. And that has literally been the case every step along the way. I consider myself an activist at heart, of somebody who is just organizing as a citizen member. I always have a clipboard within arm's reach. Just who I am. But literally from the first time I ran for office, I ran for a local seat. For a county board at the same time as I was finishing college, graduating college, got engaged, was working full time. But the incumbent declined to run for re-election after 33 years. And everyone was rallying around a establishment candidate who, frankly, didn't believe in climate change and was a huge supporter of Scott Walker in that office. Mm-hmm. I had never run for anything before, but I realized, like, if this guy looking around, no one else was going to challenge him. And I said, if this guy wins, that's it. Like, my calls to try and make a difference in this to this guy would never be heard. And so
Sure.
I viewed it as I had to step up and run, and worked like mad that winter, and happened to be the snowiest winter in 50 years, trudging through the snow. And in the district, Scott Walker got 66% of the vote, but I still won in that local election. And so I've kind of almost every step of the way, I've always viewed it as being, okay, I get to serve in this position for a limited time representing the people, and I'm going to fight like heck for them, because change doesn't happen automatically. And the status quo is just making things harder and harder for people. Yeah. So that's exactly why I ran for state Senate. Was the incumbent was awful. He also didn't believe in climate change. And,
is that right? Oh my God, wow. He was a Democrat.
I know. Like, I keep finding these people all over the place. But yeah, he ran from the Republican wing of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
He was somebody that he killed a bill that would have tackled climate change in Wisconsin by boosting our renewable portfolio standards, which is, green talk for we would have stopped spending so much money on fossil fuels in a state where we don't produce fossil fuels, right?
Sure.
And so this was a bill that was very popular, but he killed it on the 40th anniversary of Earth Day in a very,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, exactly. Just symbolism wrapped in a metaphor right there. And I knew that I knew that it would be tough, but I said, okay, I'm going to give it my summer because this is so important to push this out there, and maybe we can beat him. An interesting thing is what we ran against was not just this incumbent, but we ran against the entire party. And had
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had and you don't have to talk about all the whole time, but like the party chair actually called me and threatened me and said, you'll never be a part of our party. You'll be rooted out. You'll never serve. And I said, okay, now I have to run. Thank you for clarifying. And I ended up knocking on doors the rest of that summer for 3 months, and I lost 15 pounds. And the state Senate lost the most conservative member when we beat him 61-39.
Well done.
Well, I followed that. I followed that up here in Oshkosh, Senator, and I thought that was refreshing at the time. I mean, I'm one of those people who believes there should be more primaries in the Democratic Party. The guy you ran against was certainly not the only establishment Democrat out there. But let me ask you, where do you place yourself among Democrats? We've been asking this to other Senate Democrats. So. Or Democrats running for Senate. So, we've got Tammy Baldwin. I call her a progressive. You remember Russ Feingold, kind of like a maverick.
Yep.
You're clearly not a Herb Cole kind of corporate guy. William Proxmire, fiscal conservative, Gaylord Nelson, Earth Day. Where is Chris Larson among those Democrats?
I used to think of myself as a Russ Feingold Democrat. I was somebody who founded a Facebook group back in college to try and recruit him to run for president back in 2008. Oh. And I told him as much, and he let me know that worked out all right in the end with Barack Obama. But even since then I've considered myself a Elizabeth Warren Democrat, somebody who is all about pushing constructive policy that's going to change things, right? Especially in being able to get people access to healthcare, of being able to frankly make sure we're tackling climate change in a meaningful way. And also moving forward with implementing a wealth tax. And so I was the first state elected official to endorse in the last presidential campaign, and endorsed Elizabeth Warren. So I'm a big fan of hers. Mm-hmm. But I'm starting to realize that even all of our heroes have some flaws here and there. So I'm starting to be more comfortable with being a Chris Larson Democrat. Yeah. Just viewing these things on my own and recognizing that sometimes it may be lonely, pushing against, but also pushing against Democrats.
Well, let me ask you this: you're a progressive guy from Milwaukee.
Sure.
And a United States senator represents the entire state. Now, we're told all the time that progressive guys from Milwaukee are just toxic around the state. So how does Chris Larson campaign? You're going to have to win. You can't just win Milwaukee and Dane County to get elected statewide, right? So what's your theory as to how you're going to connect with the rest of the state?
Yeah, and I think that there is some inherent scapegoating that happens. This is, that by no means did Scott Walker invent the us versus them, the divide and conquer strategy. But my gosh, if that has not been prevalent for since the beginning of politics, right? Of like, right. Since the advent of democracy and before it, of like, oh, you think your lot in life is rough? Well, let's point at anybody else and say, look at the picture that I'm going to paint for you of how their life is great, and that's at the expense of you. Mm-hmm. And I would say, look, it's not a zero-sum game, right? By any means. If you look at the last state budget, where 421 school districts are going to see a cut as a result of what ended up happening. That's not just Milwaukee; that's every school district.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Because of things, and we got, as a result, the top tax cuts, 75% of the tax cuts are going to go to the rich. And I would say that if we're going to scapegoat, and if there's going to be an us versus them, let's look at the actual us versus them of the people who are waging full-scale class warfare, right? And that is the rich versus the poor. And so for me, my entire theme has been to unrig the system, because right now it works really well for the corporations, for the corporate elite, and for the super rich and the politicians that they have bought to be able to create tax loopholes that they can walk through with big bags of money without having to pay their taxes, right? And shifting it on to the rest of us. And by the way, when they're doing that, and if anybody starts to suspect it, that's when they lean over and whisper, well, don't trust the folks from the city, or don't trust the immigrants, or don't trust folks with a different skin tone, and try to scapegoat by pitting us up against each other. And I would say that we absolutely have more in common across the state of Wisconsin than we have differently, and we can achieve it all. if we are able to say, you know what, let's make the rich pay their fair share, and let's start ushering in policies that help absolutely everybody. Because it's only when there's a scarcity of resources, which is frankly manufactured in the richest country in the world,
Right.
that people start to feel like they are missing out and feel like they have somebody else to blame. So I'm running on the campaign to unrig the system, and that is something that rings just as true as somebody who's struggling on minimum wage, regardless of where they live, as it rings true for the small family farmer that has been neglected in the big ag bills that pass every session of Congress, right? Where they favor growth above sustainability, where they favor corporate agribusiness over specialized marketing, and they favor just continuous growth without a mind towards preserving the farming culture of Wisconsin. And so that's the frame that I look at it with.
Sure.
But then most importantly, listening. That's a key part of actually going out across the state, actually hearing people. And you can you can learn a lot if you're willing to learn a lot.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want you to be like critical of the people you're running against in the Democratic primary. I mean, you're free to if you want, but do you think that other candidates are part of this rigged system to establishment? That, I mean, there's 9 candidates now.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think all of you are equally progressive, or do you see yourself as uniquely capable of being able to unrig the system?
I mean, it depends on what policies they're putting out, and it's also about following their track record. And I've noticed, and I'm sure you have, and I'm sure voters have, that everyone is picking up the badge of progressivism and wearing it. And literally every candidate has used that either out on the stump or in their campaign emails or otherwise, of being like, let's stand up for progressive principles. And it's one thing to be able to pick up the badge and wear it when you're trying to earn their support, right? Or if you will, putting on the team cap when they're showing up to the game. It's another to say, well, wait a second, who is actually pushing for what that means, and who has a proven track record? And so I am the proven progressive in this race, and I would say that I'm the only proven progressive in this race over the last 12 years who has a consistent and thorough record to be able to demonstrate that, not just pushing against Republicans, which is fine. Everybody did that when Scott Walker was in office. It's easy to push against Trump when he is doing horrible things like, dividing families and pushing in judges that are going to rule in his favor, and frankly bankrupting America at the rest of our expense, and running an insurrection against us. But it's another thing to say, well, what do we do to actually prevent that? Because it's one thing to just stop harm, but frankly, you could elect my dog Donut, and that's gonna do the trick over Ron Johnson. But it's about, well, wait a second, what do we actually do with power? And that's where I think it's so important to actually push for real policy. And so I've authored or co-authored just about every progressive piece of legislation that's moved forward in the state of Wisconsin in my 10 years that I've served.
Which is the one that you're most proud of?
I mean, look, I think they're all my babies. These are all things I care very, very deeply about, and I could talk in depth about any of them. But honestly, it's whichever one I had talked about most recently with the person, because, when a person comes up and say, thank you for bringing that up, and so yesterday I'm kind of tearing up. There's somebody who was talking about access to healthcare. Their best friend died because they couldn't get access to healthcare because for goodness sake, they had to keep going into the clinic, be able to get their prescription refilled. They had to work like crazy to try and get access to a nurse who is underpaid, because our healthcare workers are under-resourced, especially if they're serving the Medicaid patients. And his friend didn't get access to medicine, and he died. And it's like that shouldn't happen in the United States of America. And so right now, the one that really rings true is Medicare for all, and being able to actually move to make sure that healthcare is a right and not a product. That is what is happening in every industrialized country in the world, except for here. Here it is still a product, and oh my gosh, there's so much money to be made, so it never seems to change. So you would like to see would you like to see the current Medicare program simply expanded to every citizen in the country? And include dental, eyes, and hearing, right? Exactly.
That was the question I had. So thank you for answering that. That was great.
Yes. And ending the loophole, and ending the donut hole. Second bring up of donut for those who are keeping score. So to end the donut hole where people have this gap in coverage, which is just ridiculous. This is something that's a barrier to care, right?
Well, what does Medicare for all look like from your perspective?
It means
I mean,
you
like-
walk into a doctor before you are sick, and you can say, "Hey, I want to know what I need to do to be able to stay healthy." And then that is a healthcare system where it's designed to stay healthy. It's not okay, I've had this a funny feeling in my knee for the last month, and I've resisted going in because my deductible is way too high, and I didn't want to play roulette and wonder if this is gonna be covered by my insurance or not, and so I've just struggled through it. It is saying, you know what, as soon as there's something, let's make sure that you are actually healthy and taken care of. It is making sure that you are getting the prescriptions that you need at an affordable cost. And that decision is influenced by you, your research, and the conversation with your doctor without the influence of pharmaceutical companies, without their pushing things on the doctor, without things pushing through massive marketing campaigns that ruin so many Packer games. It is just making sure that people have access to that healthcare, and people end up being healthier and living longer as a result of it.
Some of your opponents in this race are saying that we should basically keep the Affordable Care Act in place and just add a public option. What's your response to that?
I mean, if you want to tiptoe in that direction, you can, but then that still keeps the main structure that is severely flawed.
Flawed.
Yeah.
Right. It is the idea that somehow the marketplace is going to fix it, when frankly, there is frankly collusion that is happening that is making it so our prescriptions are out of the range of being affordable. And I would say that, yes, a public option is a bold idea 20 years ago. So yes, we can absolutely do that if it is the year 2000 and say, here is something that we can try for a while. But we're at the point now where we have tried these incremental changes, and very quickly, the for-profit healthcare industry has rushed in to try and fill in the gaps and figure out how they can keep making money. And it is so broken. And it is not just about the insurance component of changing that. It's about access to affordable medicines, and it is about changing the entire paradigm of what we do in order to try and keep people healthy.
I mean, would you agree that our current healthcare system is purely a product of political corruption?
I mean, it's a rigged system.
Yeah.
It is a purely rigged system, and it is something there is nobody that I have met who is like, somebody who's saying that they absolutely love their health insurance. They might like their doctor,
Sure,
right?
But like, as far as like, you could if you want to get a story out of somebody, you can say, hey, do you have a story about trying to be able to get access to healthcare that you needed or a loved one needed in the last year? or the last 5 years, and everybody has some kind of a story and some kind of a frustration that's associated with it. To my core, I live with this. This is something that I've had asthma since age 5, and I learned the hard way that term that has now become so synonymous with the health insurance industry of what a pre-existing condition is. Right? It's a fun loophole that says we're not going to cover you for the thing you actually need coverage for.
Yeah, it's a great insurance term. Oh, you have a pre-existing condition. Oh, well.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
we have to. How did healthcare become probably a different conversation, but how did it become a for-profit industry anyway? I mean, you're battling that. We're battling insurance companies. So yeah, I mean, you definitely got your work cut out for you
Sure.
to try to change this. But I'm guessing you're going to welcome that, right?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with the challenge. And our supporters are there with us too. We've got more individual donors reported than any other campaign. We are one of the first ones out there in favor of Medicare for all. We have the longest list of other issues that we're for. And frankly, for those that are interested in policy and interested in actually unrigging the system, I'm the candidate for them, right? Everyone else is kind of, they're pointing at Ron Johnson, and rightfully so. We could fill this entire time talking about Ron Johnson and how awful he is. But I do believe that there is it's about what are you actually going to do with this office for the next 6 years? And there is so much need. And it's not just a matter of, frankly speaking, it's not just a matter of Republicans versus Democrats, because some Democrats are in on the system too. 66 of the 100 US senators are millionaires. And if you look at their stock portfolios, and this was true when the ACA was trying to move forward, the people negotiating this had heavy vested interests in the healthcare marketplace as it exists. And so, these are the people negotiating it. And so it's no wonder we had some small changes that happened. But if you actually want it to work, you're going to have to elect people who don't have that vested interest in it and are saying, you know what, I want somebody who has lived this experience and who is going to wear that on their sleeve in every meeting that they're in, and is not thinking about how they're going to be able to get a gig as a lobbyist for one of these groups that comes in to lobby them after they're in office.
Let's move over to the Green New Deal. What's your take on that? I know that the way it's framed, it's going to destroy our economy if we somehow try and fix the environment. What's your view on that?
I would say yes, that frankly, yes, climate change is destroying our economy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It's like you're standing. Yeah. I mean, the argument of this absolutely needs to be reframed. We are walking through a tunnel where the train is coming at us. And the negotiation is, it's a question of like, how fast are we going to move to get out of the tunnel? And the question is, well, we don't want to move too fast,
Yeah.
We don't want to move.
Great analogy. I love that.
We don't have a look around. I mean, I went for a run this morning with a bunch of friends, and I was admiring the sunrise until my friend, who is a professor at a university, he pointed out, he's like, you know why it's so beautiful? It's because of the wildfires that are happening out west. And so this is the debris that's in the air.
Wow.
That particular matter is what makes the sunrise so beautiful. And I was like, well, there we go. That's the world where that's the world.
That you could hardly see the mountains because there's so much smoke, and there's no fires around here. This is all from the West Coast. So. Yes.
I mean, that's the point. Literally, there is you cannot look out the window without seeing the effects right now.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
What is happening with climate change. We have this choking heat that is literally killing people in the West.
Oh.
You have the earliest hurricane in the history of the United States hitting the East Coast this year. On top of that, you have billions, if not trillions, in damage that is happening in countries every time if you look at the cumulative mass of what's happening with hurricanes, what's happening with increased tornadoes, with increased severe weather events, with drought, and with floods that are happening in fits and bursts across the country, but also the world. Right. And so there's this idea where we're sitting back and saying, well, how much do we want to spend? What is this going to cost if we have to change it? And it's like, we are very much out of time. The last generation is the one that already screwed this up. The last generation of political leaders who punted it. And now at this point, we do not have a choice. We have to act. We have to be bold. And I'm sorry if we're going to hurt the bottom line or the feelings of the folks at ExxonMobil.
Mm-hmm.
But what we can do is make sure that we're moving towards a clean energy future. And frankly, if all of that is too high and out of the range of possibility for what people understand this. This saves people at the individual level on their bottom line. If we are able at the national level to incentivize people to install solar panels and to move towards clean renewable energy and off of fossil fuels, for the sole purpose or for the sole reason that Wisconsin is not somebody that's producing coal. We don't have coal mines here. We don't have natural gas here. And we don't have fossil fuels, right? So we don't have those. So everything that we are getting, we are importing. And that is a dollar amount that is over $10 billion annually that we are spending out of state. So even if the world wasn't on fire right now, which it is, even if it wasn't, we're losing $10 billion annually as a state for all of the energy. All
amazing.
of our needs. Yeah. So
But
moving towards renewable, that keeps that in our economy. That helps everybody.
In the United States Senate, though, isn't it the Democrats that are as responsible for this as the Republicans? I mean, you've got Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, that they don't seem, even if the Democrats had a solid majority, do you think that the Democrats are going to be able to follow through on this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that you bring a very good point up, Tony, which is it depends on which Democrats you get in there.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like the Bucks game, right? We're going to cheer for the Bucks regardless. We're cheering whoever has the Bucks uniform on. But there's a difference between whether it's Giannis who's in there or it's you, right? You know, maybe you're amazing at basketball. We're all going to cheer for whoever's got the Bucks uniform on because we're like, you're on our team, fantastic. But there's a certain set of skills, and it's a question of who's going to be able to deliver and who has a history of being able to do that you're going to put in. And I apologize, you're probably amazing at basketball.
No. No, but I mean, do you think that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party should work more actively to primary people like Manchin and Sinema?
That one I will say, I would say that in that case, Joe Manchin is in a state where Joe Biden lost by almost a 2-to-1 margin. Right. And so the idea, he is a rare breed where I'm not sure he could necessarily get elected. You know, I don't know if he could get elected in the state of Wisconsin, but in the state of West Virginia, there is something where people are voting for him. So he's doing something right.
Yeah.
And I would say it's one thing to point at the things that we're not getting. But let's look at what we have. Had we not had Joe Manchin, or if Joe Manchin decided to flip a coin and decided he's a Republican tomorrow, we would not have the $250 per child tax credits that are going out for the next year that's going to cut child poverty in half, right? We would not have the $2 trillion that moved forward to be able to help shore up people in this pandemic when it was sorely needed. And we wouldn't even have a remote discussion about what we're going to move forward with the American Jobs Plan and the infrastructure package, which frankly will do a great deal in tackling climate change. So while yes, he is definitely somebody who's listening a little bit closer to the fossil fuel industry than I would like, it is about which Democrats we end up electing. You know,
well, we also wouldn't have the largest defense budget in our history. And let's gotta ask you about that. Do you think
I'd say it's better to build on than to start rooting people out, because it's like, we don't like Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin could
right.
Guess what you're getting now, guys?
Yeah, but do you think it's
you're nothing? We're getting the country grinding to a halt, and the other. And I get, and I want to make this point clear. There is only one party that is actually governing, and in the interest of actually governing and trying to fix things in the country. And I get that we're going to have discussions about what those policies are, who's best, you know, how best to implement those. But literally right now, the other party is not shown themselves not to be interested in governing for everybody. They're interested in tax cuts, pushing for the super rich, and for pushing in judicial nominations that favor their side. And that's
absolutely. But do you think it's time on our defense budget to start making some meaningful cuts in it? I mean, the programs you're talking about are not free. They're going to cost money.
Yep.
Obviously, you clearly believe in progressive taxation, right? We need more from the super rich and from the corporations. But is it also time to say, look, we're spending way too much on defense, and our country is technically at peace? What is your view on that?
Technically at peace. We're still at war.
Yeah.
We're in the longest war in United States history. Still, right? They're kind of wrapping it up, but we're still in the midst of it. And it's wild that we still think of that as a relative peace, because all we're doing is just paying it. But you're absolutely right. I do think that we're spending way too much on defense. And I do think that we should trim the defense budget by at least 10% the next go around. And that's something that I'm committed to, because it is, especially when they're not adjusting to the world as it is, right? If there's a limited funds that are moving forward to be able to actually address climate change, if there's limited funds that are moving forward to be able to address the refugee crisis that's going to get exacerbated by increased climate change and civil unrest across the world. And if there's less, frankly, the State Department has 1% of the budget of the Defense Department, and those are the funds that can actually prevent wars, create peace, create lasting change and understanding across the world. And on top of that, the biggest threat, the biggest change, the biggest thing that hit everybody last year was the pandemic. And if we are not investing our resources into making sure that people have access to healthcare, making sure that we are able to prevent the next pandemic before it happens, that to most people is about individual security, and that's something we should absolutely be directing our funds towards.
We are getting to the end of our time here. Can you give us maybe a closing statement as to why you think people should support Chris Larson in the primary, and where people can find more information about your campaign?
Sure. Yeah, I would say, look, I welcome the conversation. I am appreciative of you guys having me on. And I would say, look, if you are interested in electing a proven progressive who's going to continue to fight for you from day one on, I'm your guy. If you're looking for someone else where you're willing to roll the dice, if you're willing to vote for one of the millionaires, you can vote for one of the other folks who are in this race, or you can vote for the incumbent. I encourage you to check out more about our plans to unrig the system, other detailed policies that we're putting out at voteforlarson.org. And there you can see our launch video and all the other fun stuff. And if folks are willing to donate, they can do that. If they want to reach out and say what a lousy job I did on this interview, well, you can go ahead and do that.
And Senator, we didn't bring up, you are a marathon runner, is that correct?
Yeah, that's you need a hobby. You need a hobby.
Yeah. And so a U.S. Senate race is more like a marathon, right? It's not like a sprint.
Yes. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I've done too many. I'm not going to say the number, but yeah, I did it. Yeah, do those, and I do triathlons and that stuff. But yeah, it's better. It's better than the usual hobby of stress relief in our state of which I do enough of too.
Very. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Senator. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you the best of luck in the election.
Yeah, we hope you'll come back on as the race heats up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you both.
All right. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Take care. Hey, Tony, I really enjoyed talking with Chris today. This was one of my favorite interviews so far.
Yeah, he's been one of the most outspoken progressives in the state Senate for 10 years now, going on 10 years. And I think he can be a real strong force in this race. I do think, though, that, we raised this in the show. I do think being a progressive from Milwaukee doesn't necessarily play well
right
in the rest of the state, but he claimed he's going to go out and listen to people, and we'll see what happens with that. What I like about Chris Larson, and I've liked this about him for a long time, is he will call out the BS on the other side.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
you need somebody like that.
I mean, I'm the biggest supporter of civility around, but I don't think civility means caving into nonsense.
Right.
I think that you need to call out the nonsense, and I think he's one of the people that does that.
Yep.
And will do that. But he's running against candidates that are going to be much better financed than he is, that have in some cases better name recognition. So we'll see what happens. I'm just thrilled that he did our show.
Yeah, I thought it was a great interview, and I look forward to talking with him again on some different topics as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And so that's that we've had quite a few Senate candidates on now, and it's at some point we probably should try and kind of splice together some of the greatest hits of all of them. Do a summary episode for our listeners. So
that would be cool.
Yeah.
That means a lot more work for me, but I'm okay with that.
As long as it's work for you.
Yeah, that's right. Awesome, man. Well, thanks everybody for tuning into this episode. We got a lot more coming up on future episodes. So hope everybody stays elevated.
Yes, stay elevated.
You're running on empty with Matt and Tony.